This is My Thursday, and we're going to have a series of activities where we bring professionals on to address specific professional and personal development topics by coaches, speakers, authors, etc. Every Thursday at 6 p.m. as the first hour of the session that Paula just talked about. It'll be hosted by MyT.coach, and MyT.coach is a platform that helps professionals develop by getting coaching, training, and having access to networking through our activities. And I'm one of the coaches. I'm Marc Naddell, as Paula introduced before. Tonight, we have two veteran recruiters who are going to discuss what interviewers should do in preparation and during and after interviews so they can ace it, so they can give themselves the best opportunity to get that offer, because that's really what it's about. You want to have the offer so you're in the driver's seat to either accept the role or decline it. So there's things you have to do, and that's what myself as one of the veterans and Scott Gordon, the other veteran, are going to be talking about. My background is I'm a veteran recruiter. I've done recruiting for 10 years. I focus primarily on management and leadership, executive type candidates who are competing for a role. Before I became a recruiter, I spent 25 years as an executive in Fortune 500 companies headquartered in Europe, Asia, and the United States. And with me is Scott Gordon. And Scott has very impressive recruiter credentials. He's had over 25 years as a recruiter. He's the guide and the coach for over 700 recruiters that are based in 50 offices around the world. And before I say anything more about Scott, I would like to turn it over to him, and he can finish the introduction because he knows more about himself than I do. Scott?
Yep. Thank you, Mark. And I would be amiss if I didn't notice your 49ers hat. Very nice. Very nice. Yeah. Yeah. Hello, everyone. My name is Scott Gordon. I am a strategic advisory partner with Vaco. I've been with this company. This year is my 20th year with the company. And I have been, like Mark said, I've been a recruiter for over 25 years, the majority of which has been in technology, but have done a myriad of other things, or for lots of other different types of positions, have hired probably thousands, if not tens of thousands of people, and worked with thousands of different clients. So hopefully this will provide some value for you going forward. The sort of ask me anything when Mark and I discussed this was sort of like going off of Reddit, where this is going to allow you to have a peek a peek behind the curtain. If you've got any questions, fire away. If you're afraid to ask any question to a recruiter or to an HR representative or to a potential employer, you can ask me, and I will certainly give you that information so you can use that going forward.
Thank you, Scott. Yes, Scott and I, in preparation for this discussion, we covered many different topics. We've prioritized those. We're going to start with that, but at the same time, we're going to be looking at any of the questions that come in through the chat, and where we think those questions have a very broad appeal for this audience, we will stick those in and cover them with some priority. So if you're ready to go, Scott, we can start with the first topic.
Sure.
Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Oh, by the way, I wanted to thank you for participating with this while you're on vacation. I really do appreciate your dialing in from Florida, the Gulf Coast, enjoying some sunshine and fishing and kayaking. So thank you very much.
Of course. It's a working vacation. It's all fine. But
Okay.
Yeah, you're certainly welcome. Glad to be here.
Cool. Okay, so the first topic is when a candidate is prepping for an interview that they've been invited to participate in.
Sure.
How can they assess their own strengths and weaknesses objectively when they compare their resume to the job description? And how can they address any gaps that they discover? What's your insight there?
Particularly, I mean, if you're looking at and I'll take just one step back, Mark. I mean, I think when people look at when people are developing a resume or developing a resume to apply for a position, they tend to send one resume and in hopes that that encompasses everything, and that tends to lead to the what I like to see as a recruiter is a 2 to 3 page resume. Three is kind of heavy for me, but it's really gearing your resume towards that particular position. And you may want to build your resume towards that particular job description, focusing on your strengths and how they apply to that job description before you just click submit. Because for me in technology, a business analyst could be a data analyst, they could be a project manager, they could be they could be a lot of different things. But look at the position for which you are applying and gear your resume towards that. If there are any gaps there, one of the things that we've always said is if an interviewer asks you, have you ever worked with XYZ skill? The answer is no. If the answer is no, follow that up with a but. No, but I have done something similar, and it's ABC. So you need to be able to go through that job description with a fine-tooth comb and identify your strengths and certainly play to those strengths, but also look at the places where you don't fit and look at some of those ancillary skills that you may have or that you may have had in a job two or three positions ago, and how those skill sets apply to what you're doing now or apply to that particular job description, really.
That makes a lot of sense. And that triggered two related thoughts.
Sure.
The first one is less is more. Having been most of my career as the hiring manager in a vice president role,
Right.
looking at lots of resumes, for me, less was always more. The fact that someone would have presented me with a resume where nothing that did not apply to the job description was on that resume, right? That's the first
Right.
thing. And that leads me to the second thing is don't try to boil the ocean in your job search, which means try to have a very focused search where all the jobs are basically in the same funnel. So one resume would cover a lot of those things. You know, when you're trying to boil the ocean, your resume has to cover everything. How do
Sure.
you feel about that?
I 100% agree. I think that, again, I see so many people that have done or have held 5 or 6 different positions, trying to encompass that on one particular resume. And I think that is, if you're applying for, say, a leadership position so you can show your experience across the enterprise, that's a great idea. If you are applying for a senior developer role or a senior director of finance role, the position that you had, 5 years ago as a level 1 help desk analyst is not relevant and shouldn't be on your resume, or you shouldn't add it to your resume unless it comes up during the conversation. But I don't believe that there's. I encourage people to have more than one resume. Have as many resumes as you like. Have as many resumes that you can build to fit the position for which you're applying.
It's kind of like golf clubs in your golf bag. You can't use the
Correct.
same club for every stroke on the course, so you got to pick the right one. Same for
That's right.
the resumes. You know,
That's
and
right.
that
And if it's
was
not working, if you're not getting the responses that you're shooting for, it's probably something on your resume. So I would share that resume with a friend, share it with another recruiter, that if you can find another recruiter to have a look at it and say, what do you think I'm doing wrong? What would you add? What would you take away? But a lot of the times I see people that will apply over and over and over and over to 10 to 15 different positions that we may have with the exact same resume, and they're not going to get a response because it's the same one, and it just doesn't stick.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. If there's any questions on that, please feel free to type that in the chat. We're going to move over to the next topic. So before they go into, assuming they've got the right resume and they're getting ready to go to that first interview, what should they be doing to prep for the people they're going to be meeting or the environment they're going to be in during that interview?
A lot of the times people will they will try to find they will look at company information, which is all fine and good, figuring out what the company actually does. And believe it or not, there are people that don't do that. They just think, well, I've got an interview, they want to interview me. And when the question comes out, well, what can you tell me about for example, what does Google do? I know you're interested in applying at Google. What does Google do? And if you can't answer that question, that's a knock. So really figure out what that company's business is, who their end clients are, and how you can be a part of that. Some of the other things, the ancillary things, that is, I would do some research on LinkedIn. I would do some research on LinkedIn as to who you're interviewing with. A lot of the times on LinkedIn, you can find out other members of those teams and look at their backgrounds and see where they've come from. There may be people that are no longer with that company. You can certainly reach out to those via LinkedIn or an email or something like that to say, what did you think about this company? How did it go? Why did you leave? That sort of thing. That's kind of a deeper dive if you're really wanting to do that, but it's certainly possible.
Hey, quickly, there's a question that just came in from our first topic, which
Sure.
was to keep irrelevant content from your work experience off your resume, to keep it concise. So the
Sure.
question was, what if that's going to introduce some gaps? How do you cover gaps that might be introduced by taking roles that aren't relevant off your resume?
You know what? If there's a gap, just be honest about it. There are a lot of people that especially in today's market, that have a gap in their resume. Maybe it's a sabbatical. Maybe they wanted to go design pottery for a year. I mean, there's a lot of respect for that. I mean, there are a lot of people that get burnt out that just have a gap in their resume. Maybe they've had children, maybe that sort of thing. So if there's a gap, if it's a purely unemployed gap, then that's a whole other thing. Unemployed mean, or unemployable, like I just couldn't find any. I couldn't find a job. I couldn't find a job for a year. We're in a great market to find an opportunity. We've been in a great market for a long time. Um, there may be options, and I'm just trying to think of a good example where a candidate that I have interviewed I've said, "How long have you been on the market?" "I've been on the market for 6 months." Well, let's figure that out. I can't answer that question for you, so I'm going to ask you, why do you think you've been on the market for so long? What do you think? What do you think is holding you back? Prime example, I had a guy one time said he made $700 an hour, and I said, well, that is probably an issue if you're requesting $700 an hour on your resume. And I said, if you're requesting $700 an hour, then you don't need me, because I can't help you. Or if you're making $700 an hour where you are, can I get a job there? Because it sounds because it sounds great. But when we really get down to brass tacks, he worked 3 or 4 hours a week, and you go, oh, okay. So is that what you want to make hourly, or where do you need to be annually? So it started. You have to really put a shine on what you're presenting, put a shine on yourself and what you're presenting, and just be honest.
Right. And if I can just add to that,
Sure.
since I deal more with like senior middle management executive roles primarily, if you've had a lot of roles that are irrelevant and you've had some key roles that are relevant, what I would do is just amplify a bit more what's in
Sure.
the relevant roles and skinny down the roles that aren't really specific. I was at this company from A to Z, and it's like 1 or 2 lines in your resume because they won't even care. They'll just
Right.
care about what applies to the job you're being considered for.
If it's something interesting, I'll ask. I mean,
Okay.
like, oh, so you were a director of finance, but in between there and where you are now, you were.
Did we freeze? Hello?
I think Scott's freeze. Oh, now he's back on.
Oh,
Oh,
okay.
you were saying, okay, Scott, you cut off right when you said you were in this role, and then it
Oh,
froze.
if there's something interesting on your resume it's gonna make for a great story, like you were a director of finance and then you left and then you were a male cheerleader for the San Francisco 49ers. I want to hear about it. How did that happen? Why did you do that? I mean, that makes for a good story. That will by far, I mean, that will absolutely separate you from everybody else. It doesn't have anything to do with the director of finance position, but for me as a recruiter, I can tell a client, look, Mark's applying for a director of finance role. By the way, he was a cheerleader for the 49ers last season just because he wanted to take a break. I mean, there's it's I think we take this extremely serious, and sometimes we have to have a little bit of tongue in cheek there.
I'm not flexible enough to do that anymore, by the way.
Here,
We had another interesting question that spun off that first question,
Yeah.
which was any insights you can share about the cover letter. If you have somebody, you've been introduced to somebody as a referral and you want to send a cover letter with your resume, do you have any insights about that?
Be specific as to what is on the cover letter. Cover letters kind of go along with objective statements. They're becoming outdated. I certainly wouldn't send a cover letter as part of the document on the resume. I may send it as an email to say, "Hey, Mark, Alex forwarded me your name, and I thought that I might. He suggested that I should reach out to you about this particular position." Make it short and sweet. I'm looking at hundreds of resumes per day, and the ones that I get that have an additional cover letter on it, I just don't read it. I need to get to the meat and the potatoes of the resume. I need to get to the main point. So I'm just kind of skimming over that, if at all.
I like that. I'm actually, having been in that role as the hiring decision maker, I often didn't look at cover letters. So
Right.
if you want to be sort of traditional, at least cover some bases, I would do a cover letter, but I would just make it very concise.
Yeah.
And just introduce yourself, what's your interest and qualification, and please consider me to bring this or that to the party. And then that
Sure.
would be, you know.
And I would make that part of the email. I would not make that an additional part of the document.
Agree. That would replace the cover letter, because many
Right.
people would just forward that email with the attached resume. So
To flip that a little bit, there are don't send an empty email with just a resume attached. It happens all of the time because job applicants can get fatigued. They're tired of typing the same thing over and over. Cut and paste something and keep it in notes or a Word doc later, and just cut and paste that and put that into your email. But do not send an email. Don't send a blank email with just a document in it. Number one, it's off-putting, and number two, with the amount of spam that's going out, I'm very hesitant to click on any document if I don't know what it is, or if I don't know who it's from.
Right. Cool. Okay, another great question came in from the audience. There's a person who applied for 2 roles at the same company. One role was significantly higher than the other, but the person qualified for both. And they got a response back from HR that they filled the higher level role internally, and they'll be interviewing that person, that candidate, for the lower level role. But after that, after receiving that response from HR, they noticed on the careers page of the website, a second higher level position for which they were qualified had just been posted. And so this person would like to ask you, how should they approach HR with their interest to apply or be considered for the other higher level job?
It's a simple answer. It's to ask. If you don't ask, you don't get. So certainly ask that, say, I thank you for interviewing me for this other position. I'm also interested in the one that you just posted, because I'm also qualified for that as well. A lot of the times, and I can say this as a recruiter, very rarely do I interview someone for just one position. I'm interviewing that one person for anything that we may have. So I may have brought someone in for position A, but they also fit B, C, D, and E, that sort of thing. So it was certainly asked, say, while I'm interviewing, can I be an active candidate for the higher level position?
Mm-hmm. That's good. When I've coached people in that situation, what I would advise them is respond to HR, thank them first that they're being considered for any positions for the lower one,
Sure.
and say, I've noticed another position at this level, this higher level, has just posted. And I noticed from how it was written that I would bring a much higher contribution to the company in a role like that. Can I be considered for that role? And so if you're putting it in terms of the best interest for the company versus what you want, you have a much greater chance of them responding favorably.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Let's jump to this other one. Here's a good one, Scott. This is one you and I kicked around before. At what stage should compensation be discussed?
That's a great question. I think that knowing what the compensation is before going in is never go in blind. Never go in blind and assume that the compensation is spot on with what you want. It's certainly a good recruiter or a good hiring manager or a good HR person is going to bring that up during the interview. It's not something that I would ask immediately. There would be some assumptions based on the job description if a salary is listed, what the salary range is, and then just take that moving forward. At some point, they're going to bring up salary and compensation and benefits and bonuses and all of that. But the old adage of, don't go into it. It's just like walking into an interview in the first 10 minutes. It's asking about what's your vacation policy, or do you have childcare coverage, that sort of thing. So I would wait on the person that you're speaking with to bring that up.
Right. Yeah, the first person to bring it up in a negotiation is in the weaker spot.
Correct.
If you look at negotiations theory, right?
Agreed.
And the other thing is try to use a little bit of judo or kung fu, use the
Yes.
momentum against them. You say,
Yes.
I'm interested in roles where I can deliver the strongest contribution, and
Right.
I expect to be compensated fairly. What budget have you got allocated for this role? So you just
Right.
flip it right around on them in a very
Right.
polite way.
Right. And there are a lot of, there are a lot of states now that are prohibiting asking about salary. So, and there are pretty clever ways that recruiters can find out or figure out what your current salary is or where you need to be. But it's a common practice now among recruiters to not even, not to say, well, so Mark, what's your current rate now, or what's your current salary now? It's more, where do you need to be? What range do you need to be? What are you looking for? That sort of thing, instead of being so direct. I can remember back in the day, asking someone their salary and then getting all the way down to a W-2. And I've had a couple of people provide their W-2s just to validate their salary, which was a shock to me. They came in with their W-2 just to prove what they were making, and that was odd, but strong, but odd.
One thing I would advise, in addition to what Scott has just said, is you want to have the salary discussion as late in the process as possible.
Right.
You want to push that off, delay that, and keep the focus on, are you a good fit for them? And
Right.
are they a good fit for you? Because remember, both parties are buyers, both parties are sellers.
Right.
You have the right to say no, right? They have the right to say no. And you both have the right to say yes. So the more you can keep the focus on, well, let's make sure that there's a mutual agreement. This is right for all parties, right? Can we keep the focus on that? Because I still have questions, right? So that's a way to push it off. Certainly, Scott, you probably agree. It's not
Yeah,
until both parties look at each other and say this is a match that there
sure.
should be any discussion of compensation.
Right, right. But I mean, there are people that there are companies as well as potential employees of companies that is the number one deciding factor.
Right.
It's all, it's and everybody looks at this a little bit differently. Some may be um, as small as, and even in technology, am I in an office, or do I have to work from a cube? What kind of machine am I on, a Mac or a PC, or can I wear shorts on Fridays? Everybody has their own motivation, their own motivators, and their own the things that they want in their next role. And it's not always money, but I can certainly tell walking into an interview that as soon as a candidate starts talking about money, that's all it's about. They could work for the worst company.
Right. Yeah. So adding to that, whenever the compensation question comes up early in the process, it could be a knockout consideration on both sides.
Good.
Like you were saying, Scott, if the candidate brings it up immediately, the company may be knocked out of that candidate's process if they come back with a range that's like half of what they're looking for, right?
Right. Right.
And vice versa is the same. If they start in the beginning asking you what you're making, maybe they have a lot of applicants and they just want to get, the lowest one that may meet their requirements, right? Something like that.
Right. Right.
So getting back to an earlier question where there was a low position left and a high one has just been reposted, the person is waiting for the interview for the low position that's going to happen next Monday.
Sure.
What kind of action do you feel the candidate should take at this point?
Just letting, if they're speaking to someone in HR, they're speaking to a recruiter, I would send a note and just say, hey, by the way, I've noticed this other position. If we could kill two birds with one stone, I'd like to interview for both of them while I'm there.
I like that. That's a good one. And also put in that little comment, because I saw that thing. Right. And I feel like I could make a much stronger contribution to the company in that role.
Right.
Would it be possible we kill two birds at one stone and I interview maybe with the different managers on the same day? Something like that?
That's exactly right. Exactly.
Okay. All right. After receiving an initial round of interviews, there no response, and you followed up with an email, any other recommendation? So basically, they finished the first round. They haven't gotten any responses or feedback. What would you recommend, Scott?
Unfortunately, unfortunately, that's common among recruiters and HR representatives, because you may have, for one position, you may have 300 applicants. You may have 500 applicants. It just depends. And if you've not gotten feedback, there's a polite way to ask for feedback. You can send a note to say, thank you for your time. I'm still available. I'm still very interested in this position. Please let me know if we can follow up, and leave it with that. 1, 2 follow-ups max. And don't take it personally if they don't reply. It's just because they're probably overrun and overworked, and that's unfortunately, and that's sad, that some people can't get back. But that's one of the most common complaints in our industry, is that I went through the application process. I filled out everything online. I went in, I spoke to them for an hour and a half, and I never heard back. And that's why people get extremely frustrated with human resources. They get extremely frustrated with recruiters and that sort of thing. If you can establish a relationship in the beginning with the person that you're interviewing with, or where you're comfortable enough to follow up and just say, yo, what's happening? I haven't heard from you in a month, or, I haven't heard from you in a week. Is this position still available? It doesn't have to be super formal. Just say, look, I'm still very interested in that position. Is it still open? Are there other, and if it's not open, are there other positions that I might be a fit for? And just wait for them to reply.
Yes. So Scott brought up the word rapport. And earlier in this discussion, we were talking about using LinkedIn to study the people that you're going to be interviewing. And
Right.
that's something to go a little deeper than most people do, is when the recruiter's telling you, oh, you're going to interview on next week on Tuesday, be here from 8 till 12. And you'll be like, oh, how many people am I interviewing? Oh, you can interview HR recruiting. You're going to interview the hiring manager and two coworkers who are going to be on your same team. So, oh, do you mind? Can I have their names? So I pronounce it correctly or whatever. Say, I'd like to know who they are and what their roles are, if possible. And they may give it to you. You may have to follow up on an email, right? If they say, yeah, I'll get them for you. Make sure you follow up that day and say, please, make sure you give me their names. Then you do what Scott mentioned. You go on LinkedIn and you look at each person's profile and write a few notes on each one, because each of those notes that are something interesting, maybe an overlap between your background and theirs, or maybe some domain expertise they
Right.
have and something that you're really interested in about that role. And make sure you bring it up when you meet that person. Oh, I noticed you live in San Francisco too. I'm from San Francisco. Where did you live? Right? Or, oh, we both went to Washington State University. Or I see we both are experts in, cafe tool for AI development, right? Something like that. And that lets you connect a little deeper than just this cold answers back and forth, questions back and forth. You're getting into something personal about them, hopefully something that overlaps with you.
It kind of goes along with sales as well. I mean, I think that, and I focus much more on the candidate side than I have the client side, and spend most of my time with candidates. But the old adage of a salesperson walking into a client's office or a company's office and noticing something on that client's desk, whether it be like a soccer ball or a picture of their kids, or, oh, you play soccer too. It's just, you're trying to find a common thread.
Good point. Once you get in the environment, you may notice something in their office cube, right?
Right.
That's
Right.
something they're wearing. Like I walk in with a San Fran hat, and
Right.
anything about football, you could mention something. Or, oh, I love Joe Montana from like 30
Yeah.
years ago, right?
Yeah.
Another thing is Scott mentioned you should never follow up more than twice unless you feel like you have a strong rapport with one of those interviewers. Another interesting tactic, if you send one follow-up and you're a little nervous about sending the second one, maybe you can send them an article related to what you and they discussed building that rapport. An
Great
article about
idea.
San Francisco, an article about the cafe AI tool, something. And that
That's
may let them know it's like you have some rapport and you remember what's important to them, right?
a great idea. I like that.
Hmm. Okay. Um, let's see. A person got an offer from a company and they were able to negotiate the offer and they raised the offer. They still didn't accept the raised offer. They offered an additional conversation with the hiring manager. What should that person discuss with the hiring manager? Because the manager's a new hire as well and will start next month. So the new manager isn't even in the seat yet, but made a decision to hire that person. So any tips you have for that candidate?
Say yes. I mean,
I'd be
if you
interested to
went
know
back and
why they didn't.
negotiated for more,
What's
if
that?
you went back and negotiated for more money, and they said yes, we'll pay you this, then you're happy. I mean, or you should be, because if that's what you're going for, and they've offered it, then accept the offer. Um, I think that the interview with the new hiring manager that's not there yet, maybe just the technicality. Sometimes hiring managers don't have any say over the rate or the salary. Maybe that's down to human resources and how that's budgeted, and that may be part of the financial function of the company. A lot of the times, it's not it's out of their budget. It doesn't matter. But if they really need that position if they really need that person for the company, they probably went to somebody else and said, look, you know, John Brown really wants an additional $10,000 a year. Do we have it in the budget? Yes. Okay, then offer it to him. But I think and I may be wrong, but the other interview that they're going to do with the hiring managers that's not there is probably just a technicality or a get to know you kind of thing. I don't think it's going to have anything. I may be wrong too, like I said, but it shouldn't have anything to do with the new salary.
Yeah, I agree with you, Scott. If you said I want 100 and they were starting at 90 and then they said, okay, we'll give you 100, then
Okay.
you're pretty much stuck. I mean, if that's all you asked for,
Right.
then that's basically take it or leave it at that point. I
Right.
would feel like someone's playing a game with me. If they
Right.
asked for something, I agreed to it, and then they asked for more again.
Yep.
Situation this candidate may be in, Scott, is they said, look, you're offering me 90, but I'm currently making 100 and I need to make more than 100. And then they come back with 100. And then it's like, okay, then you have a door to open to say, well, what I
Right.
said was I'm making 100. I like my job. I'm more interested in this role, but I don't, I need to make more, because of whatever the reasons are that you
Right.
feel you're justified. Of course, you got to know what your value is in the market before you go higher. You have to understand that as well.
Absolutely.
Okay. So I think you covered this one already. Are employers even allowed to ask candidates for salary? I think you covered that.
Yeah,
Just want
it depends. It's state by state, but we as a company are assuming that that's going to be law in all 50 states. So we're practicing not asking salary now.
I know in California that's quite forbidden. We never ask for salary.
Right. I
It,
think it started in New York. I think the first state to do it was New York.
I would believe that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Here's an interesting question. Do you
Okay.
always send thank you letters? I had an instance where they got a call from a recruiter, and after 10 minutes, in the last round of an interview, they said the company was going to make them an offer, and therefore they didn't follow up with thank you notes. The offer is still pending after 1 week. What would you recommend at this point?
I love thank you letters. I think they're very kind, and they definitely make an impact. I have and when I've spoken to other newer recruiters, and I've actually shown them handwritten thank you notes that I've gotten because I keep them. Some people wouldn't pay attention to them, but I think it's extremely kind and it's extremely thoughtful to send a follow up letter after an interview. So I would give that person 2 thumbs up for doing that.
Right. Here's one. A person has a gap in employment.
Mhm.
They're still searching for a new one. It's a fairly significant gap. And the previous salary from many years ago, should they be referencing that at all when they're engaging with a new employer?
No, I wouldn't. I mean, it just depends on how significant is significant. If it's 10 years ago, obviously inflation and salary changes and things like that, or you're not going to be, you're not in the same ballpark. So I probably would not bring that up because, and again, too, that goes back to the salary question. How much are you making? Well, that was, X number of years ago, and they can't ask that question anyway. What salary range are you? What salary range do you need to be in? And that's your window of opportunity to say, look, I need to make this. This is the salary that I'm looking for.
Yeah, I find if they can, an employer will always try to anchor you to a previous salary if possible.
Of course.
And we both know that price points in markets for roles go up and down based on supply and demand, and also where you sit in the normalized curve of expertise, right? If you're in the top 1% in your profession, you don't expect to take the market rate. If you're fairly new in that profession, you can't expect to make the average that everyone else is making who's been there a long time, right? So it's like those two sets of factors come into play. You may have been out of your job for 5 years, but you've maintained your expertise, and maybe your expertise is in high demand right now. So
Right.
then you have to understand the market price and go for that.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
How would you look for market pricing if you were looking at a role, Scott?
I would look at other positions in your area, and sometimes recruiters and HR representatives won't list the salary because it may open up the door for unqualified people. You know, somebody that's making 70,000 that sees 200,000 on a for a similar title, they're going to go, oh yeah, I'd love to, I want that. So, you know what, I would look at other similar positions, and be careful when you're looking at that. I would try to make it as close to home as possible. Obviously, if you're in uh, Jackson, Mississippi, don't research salaries for San Francisco. You know, look for other metropolitan areas that are around the same size of where you are currently.
Any particular web tools that people can access research salaries?
Salary.com has a great tool. There are multiple salary calculators that are available, and it seems
Is
like there's
Indeed
a new one that
one of
comes
those?
out. There's a new one that comes out every month. So certainly Google salary calculator, and you'll be able to find a whole list.
Oh, Google. Okay. Indeed has one too, right?
Yeah, they do. They do.
And is Green Door still a good one for that, or is that past?
Glassdoor.
Glassdoor. Thank you.
Yeah,
Yes.
Glassdoor does provide some information. Yes, absolutely.
Okay. So those are four people if you're looking to compare
Sure.
salaries. I wouldn't stick with just one. Of course, I think Google would be a great one, and
Absolutely.
salary.com would be a great one, but you can research multiple and then see if there's a lot of correlation, right?
Right. I mean, and another thing, another place to look is you can go down a rabbit hole, but I would certainly search Reddit. Most users on Reddit are anonymous, and there are job search boards on there where previous or current employers may share salary. So you can certainly search Reddit. I mean, that's proving to be a very, very valuable tool in the job search.
Right. You know, one thing I advocate for folks is to do a lot of networking constantly. If you're a career professional, it's good to know a lot of other professionals, not just at your level, above and below you as well. And if you're not certain where to begin, you got your research on the tools. You can also ask people in your network who have some experience, like, what do you think the salary is for this kind of company here for my role, right? So that's another way to complement the online
Right.
tools. Scott, there's an Alex who asked, is it ever okay to say negative things about former employer?
No, it's not. I mean, I would be very, very careful with that. I mean, even after having done this for 25 years, if someone starts leaking that in, I start to see a jilted lover. I didn't like the way that they did this or they did that, and a lot of the times you can have someone come in that is hostile. They're hostile towards their current employer. They're mad at their current employer because something happened, and and I think we've all had those days where you come home and you go, I'm out of here. I'm quitting and I'm leaving and I'm going to go find another place. And the first thing that happens in the interview when they sit down with you or I is they say, well, I just don't like working there anymore. The company's changed. I don't like the managers, that sort of thing. And that just gets the interview off on a wrong foot. The purpose of the interview is to talk about what you can do and what your abilities are, not what the company has done to you or not given you or that sort of thing. It's not about the company that you work for. It's about you.
That's a good point. Here's another question that goes back to our earlier part of this discussion. how would you approach tailoring a resume for a specific role? Is there any kind of a process you go through?
Sometimes you could do, I mean, do it side by side. I mean, have the job description on your screen along with your resume and match what it is that they're looking for. If you've done it, I would certainly be able to highlight that. That would be my suggestion for that. Instead of just trying to read it once and then wing it and write yourself, write it, in one sitting. But have it up and mirror that job description in your resume.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I will say this, there are a lot of products that will do this for you. A lot of AI products, Bard, ChatGPT, et cetera, that will do that for you. It's not fooling any recruiters. I will tell you that there are products that are available now on the market that can look to see if this was AI generated or not. If it's overly verbose and uses extreme, uncomfortably fancy words or emojis or that sort of thing. I mean, we see that a lot. We see that a lot from people. Yeah, from people that will input a job description into ChatGPT along with their resume and say, write my resume to match this job description. And it's causing headaches because the candidate can't do what their resume states. So we have to be a lot more stringent in our interview process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you feel tempted to use that process that Scott mentioned people are doing, be sure to go through whatever was generated and rewrite it in your own language.
Sure.
I mean, it might have like really structured it and flowed it correctly, but don't let it have words you wouldn't use. Don't let it propose you have skills you don't have or exaggerate achievements. So
Right.
you can clean it that way. Be sure to keep keywords that are applicable though, that are truthful about you. Any keywords that are in the job description, you want to keep those in your resume for matching.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think that it's okay to use some sort of AI tool if it's for a sentence or two, where my brain's just not working as it should right now, and I need to say this. I was a project manager at this company, and I did these three things.
Mm-hmm.
Ask AI to say, how would you say this more eloquently? It's totally okay. Or step away from your computer and come back and try it later.
Right. Right. Okay. Here's a question. What are some advice for new immigrants fresh to the country with great skills? What's the best way for them to get into the pipeline to find jobs? Should it be LinkedIn or is there other channels that you'd recommend, other platforms?
That's a difficult question because we get number one, confirm your visa status. There are certain questions that I can't ask as a recruiter legally in an interview, like what's your current, are you a citizen? Do you have your green card? That sort of thing. If you do and you're eligible to work without any sort of sponsorship, I would certainly say that immediately. Say, I do not need sponsorship. I have a green card, et cetera, et cetera. There may be other, if you're new to the country and you've got a community that you found in your area, I would certainly talk to other people in that community to say, because they probably know, they probably have some tips and tricks on their in their own, like I said, in their own area that they might be able to help you with. If you have not, if you are not eligible to work in the United States right now, with whether it be H1 or TN1 or F1 or whatever it is, I would certainly approach someone that could sponsor your visa, sponsor your work visa, and approach them. And a lot of it's going to be dependent upon your skills, if they're willing to do that, I should say.
So your point is that networking is a really important component if you have a
Absolutely.
community.
It is. Yes.
Another thing that I've learned is many people who newly immigrated and are trying to find a job, often it's easier to get a student visa to stay here. And so you could be a student, community college even, and just have the right to stay here while you're developing your network, or putting your profile on LinkedIn, and
Right.
responding to career opportunities on job boards, right? That you could try that as well, because
You
time is a
could.
big factor, right?
Yeah, it is timing, but like I said, just be certain to be able to discuss that immediately. That's probably going to be one of the first questions out of the recruiter's mouth is how are you currently eligible to work in the United States? A lot of the times, make sure that you look at the job description, because sometimes the job descriptions will say somewhere in the job description, unable to sponsor or transfer visas, or some may say we are able to transfer or sponsor a visa. So certainly look for that. You may actually add that as a keyword in your search.
Okay. Yeah, we got 7 minutes left. So
Okay.
here's one more.
Okay.
Someone has over 10 years experience after getting their graduate degree as a
Okay.
biologist, and they want to crack into pharma as an R&D scientist. But there are
Okay.
some gaps both in experience and skill set. So what are some techniques, tactics, strategies this person might employ to even get considered for one of those roles?
Um, they may want to consider how much of a step laterally or back would you consider to make it into an entirely different role, and maybe apply for those roles. And that shows some sacrifice that, look, I've got 10 years of experience as a biologist, but it's in a different area. But to me, and I'm not a biologist, but biology is biology. It's just like recruiting is recruiting. If it's for a chief financial officer or a level one help desk, I'm confident I could do it. It just takes some time to get more comfortable in that. So figure out where it is that you need to be and how comfortable you are with taking a lateral step, or maybe even a step backwards for a short term, to gain the experience you need to further yourself in that field.
I understand what you're saying. So be willing to go onto that ladder, but maybe a lower level than you were
Right.
targeting initially. And
Absolutely.
and what you bring to the table is you have the skills already for that lower position, and you're
Right.
committed to filling in the gaps to climb that ladder.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That's a good story. Okay. So here's one: how to better answer a question, why are you looking for a job? Sometimes it could be the pressure or the overtime demands from your boss. How to word this more appropriately or position it?
I like there's a meme on the internet now that says, so why are you interested in this job? And the person the candidate interviewing says, because I need to eat. I like food. I like food. I mean, it's because I'm looking for my next opportunity. I'm looking for an opportunity to grow. I'm looking for a company that I could stay long term. I'm looking. I feel like I'm stagnant in my current role, whatever it may be. But make it personal. Make it about you. Don't make it about your employer.
Mm-hmm.
I'm
Yes,
looking for a job because my boss is a jerk. That's a bad answer.
yes, yes. I like the growth one. I
Sure.
like the one where, I'm looking to develop new skills is another one. I
Sure.
like the one where I can make a stronger contribution. That always says something about your initiative, like you're
Right.
very ambitious and you
Right.
want to make a contribution. Company should
Right.
like that, right?
Right. Because I want to get better. I mean, there's I've topped out where I am. I'm 30 years old. I need to grow.
Yeah.
And I can see that growth within your company based on the homework that I've done. This is the place where I want to be.
Good one. Here's another question. I think you are the best person I know to answer. What are
I'm
the
scared of the question.
Well, with all of your guiding other recruiters and all your experience helping candidates, reviewing candidates, this question is great for you. So, what are recruiters looking for in a candidate beyond the resume?
Interpersonal fit, interpersonal fit with the company. I start to look at, and a lot of the times we consider the personality of the hiring manager, the makeup of the team. Typically, when we receive a requirement from a client, there's a lot more to it than just black and white, what's written on the paper. There is, would this person work well in, say, a startup environment, where they have to wear 10, 15 different hats and work 60 hours a week, but they're going to develop something that's really interesting and really cool? There's people that would want to do that. And a lot of the times I'll ask a candidate a question: would you rather sit in the corner like a plant and just write code, and would you be happy with that? Or do you want to work at a place that has some problems, that has some challenges? And do you feel like that you're the fireman? You can put out fires, because there are two different types of employees: those that look for problems to solve, and those that don't want to do that. They just want to sit, they just want to be quiet and do their job and go home. So there are lots of different things that we look at. And does the personality match the company? Do they have the same morals, the same values, that sort of thing? We work with companies that are religious based. We work with companies that are that own casinos, that sort of thing. Is this person going to work well in an environment such as that?
Okay, great. That's really good. So we only have about a minute left. So this is how I want to bring this to a close: is we have about 25 or more unanswered questions. All of these questions were great. We wish we had another hour to go through this. I'm sure we'd even generate more questions that we'd be glad to answer. So I'm going to ask the audience this. Since there's so much interest in this, just type a Y in the chat if you'd like us to feature another hour like this in the future, where we can continue this kind of exchange on how to get that offer, what you need to do, how to respond, etc. Just type a Y if you'd like to have this continued at some future date. And in the meantime, I really want to thank Scott, who has just endless ideas, endless experience, endless guidance. He'd be such an awesome coach for anyone on here that was like his candidate, because I can just tell he would put in the time, effort, and give the great advice. So especially on your vacation, Scott, thank you so much for preparing and then actually being on time and putting 100% in. I really appreciate that.
Glad to be here, Mark. Thank you so much, and thank you to all of the questions that came in. It was a joy. So I really appreciate everybody being here as well. Thank you, Mark, for the invite.
Okay. Good night, Scott.
Good night. We'll see you guys. Bye-bye.